This is Russell Copeland, former NFL player for the Buffalo Bills, Green Bay Packers, and Philadelphia Eagles. Played in Super Bowl 28 as a member of the Buffalo Bills. Today, I'm going to talk about the lack of African-American coaches in the National Football League. And this is a major issue, an issue that cannot be looked over and it cannot be ignored. And for me personally, I think the reason why the lack of African-American coaches are because of false narratives. And those false narratives, I think, is questions about their intelligence, their intellect, and the lack of abilities to lead NFL franchises. I think those are some of the issues. I think the other issues are systemic racism. I think they have to face white privilege that's given to white coaches. And this season, after this season, or before the end of the season, there were 5 coaching vacancies in the National Football League. The Cardinals, the Panthers, the Broncos, the Texans, and the Colts. All 5 of those vacancies were filled and only one African-American coach was hired, and that's D'Amico Ryans for the Texans. Congratulations to D'Amico. Wish you much success, my brother. And the Panthers hired Frank Wright, and the Broncos hired Sean Payton. I'm going to focus on the Cardinals hire Jonathan Gannon, defensive coordinator for the Eagles, and the Colts hire Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. Both of these coordinators only have 2 years experience, but they are coordinators for the Philadelphia Eagles. One main reason why the Philadelphia Eagles lost against the Kansas City Chiefs was because of the lack of adjustments that they did not do in the second half. Neither one of these coordinators made the adjustments necessary for the Philadelphia Eagles to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. But who's on the Kansas City Chiefs calling plays? It's Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy again is passed over. He's leapfrogged over by 2 more coaches. 2 coaches on the biggest stage in the National Football League, the Super Bowl. He outcoached these 2 coordinators. Eric Bieniemy's resume speaks for itself, but I'm going to give it to you. As an offensive coordinator for 5 years, Eric Bieniemy has led his football team to 5 straight AFC championships and not played not one on the road. He has been to 3 Super Bowls out of 5 years, and he's won 2. Just won Super Bowl 57 against the Philadelphia Eagles. His offenses have been in the top of the National Football League. But again, Eric Bieniemy is not getting credit for being a play caller. Who's calling the plays, Andy Reid or is it Eric Bieniemy? Well, Matt Nagy had the same position for the Kansas City Chiefs before Eric Bieniemy took over in 2018. Matt Nagy was promoted and he was given a head coaching job for the Chicago Bears. Ultimately, he was fired a few years later. There's also Matt LaFleur at Green Bay. Nathaniel Hackett. Who's calling the plays, Nathaniel Hackett or Matt LaFleur? Nathaniel Hackett gets an opportunity, gets a promotion to coach the Denver Broncos. Now I'm going to switch to another Super Bowl winning coordinator in Byron Leftwich. Byron Leftwich was fired after this season, after his 4th year. 3 out of his 4 years, his offense was in the top of the National Football League. His first year in 2019, Jameis Winston threw for over 5,000 yards. Led the lead in interceptions, but still threw over 5,000 yards. Here comes Tom Brady the following year in 2020. The GOAT. They win a Super Bowl. Offense is amongst the top in the National Football League. 2021, they lose in the playoffs to the Rams. A couple of plays away from beating the Rams, and the Rams went on and won the Super Bowl. Again, offense is one of the top offense in the National Football League. Last year's struggles offensively for Tom Brady, and that offense has been well documented. First of all, you have to start with Tom Brady. Tom Brady had a lot of issues off the field. He leaves camp for a couple of weeks. During that time and shortly after, he gets a divorce. The offensive line was depleted. There is no continuity on the offensive line. The wide receivers, same situation. They were depleted. So Tom Brady didn't have the continuity with his wide receivers. So overall, the continuity for the offense was not there this year, but it's been well documented. But Byron Leftwich was fired. You know, something that happens to African-American coaches when they're winning, they don't get the credit. It's either the coach they're coaching with or it's the quarterback. But that's not the same for their white counterparts, the white coaches. That's not said. They're promoted because of that. Or they have to go to another team. For instance, you look at Eric Bieniemy. He's taken over for the Washington Commanders as their offensive coordinator. One thing for sure, I'll definitely be cheering for the Washington Commanders offensively. But with his resume, he's having to go prove himself again. But the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 years experience, they're not having to prove themselves. That's the privilege that I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and talk about Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett gets the job for the Denver Broncos. It was early on that it was evident that he was way above his head. Early on in the year, it's 4th and 4. He decides to kick a 63, 64-yard field goal. Didn't get it when you got Russell Wilson. He lost his quarterback and he lost his football team when he went for it. But since then, Nathaniel Hackett is fired during the season. He has an offensive coordinator job for the New York Jets. It can't be for him calling plays because out of 32 teams, the Denver Broncos was dead last. That's the musical cheers. That's the favoritism. That's the privilege that I'm talking about. But usually when you are associated with a great head coach, it's called a coaching tree. And when you have that coaching tree, those coaches usually get head coaching jobs. Let's talk about Bill Belichick's coaching tree. You have Patricia. You have Josh McDaniels. You have Mike Vrabel. And you have Joe Judge. Josh McDaniels take over for Denver Broncos some years ago. He goes 11-17. His second year, he's fired with 4 games remaining. Matt Patricia with the Lions, 13-29-1. Joe Judge, 10-23. I don't even really know why I'm talking about Joe Judge, because Joe Judge has never been an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, yet he was put in place, hired as the head coach for the New York Football Giants. It didn't take long for the team to know he didn't know what he was talking about, and he was not a leader amongst men. That same football team were in the playoffs this year under Brian Dable. Now you look at Matt Patricia and you look at Joe Judge. Buddy system, they go back to the New England Patriots this year. Uncle Bill takes care of him. He don't even know what to do with him. Patricia is a defensive coordinator. He's calling plays now. Mac Jones take a step back because Matt Patricia doesn't know what he's talking about offensively. He can't talk to him in game to help Mac Jones, who's struggling. A major step back for the New England Patriots, but they took a step back because of the buddy system. I'm going to name some other coaches that I feel like have gotten opportunities over African Americans. Cliff Kingsbury, 3 losing seasons in a row for Texas Tech, fired. A couple months later, he's hired as the Arizona Cardinals coach. There's Adam Gase. Goes 23-25, hired in 2016 for the Dolphins. If my intellect is correct, 23-25 is a losing record. Yet after being fired a couple of weeks later, he's hired as the New York Jets coach. He goes 9-23, 79 his first year. The second year, he starts off 0-13. 0-13 is one of the worst starts in the history of the National Football League. If not, it's right there at the top, near the top. 2-14 that season, finishes 9-23. So now I got to talk about Jeff Saturday. Jeff Saturday had no experience coaching in college or in the National Football League. I love the body of work that Jeff Saturday has done as a football player. He's probably going to get into the Hall of Fame as a center. He's the center that anchored the offensive line when Peyton Manning was the quarterback. Did a great job as an analyst for ESPN. But with no coaching experience, he was taken from being an analyst in the middle of the year for the Colts and giving a head coaching job an opportunity where there's African-American coaches who are scratching and clawing, trying their best to become head coaches and not even getting the opportunity. That is white privilege. And it's not about Jim Irsay, because I think Jim Irsay has done a tremendous job of hiring African-Americans. He hired Tony Dungy, and he gave Jim Caldwell an opportunity to become a head coach. But it's just about the privilege in general. African Americans cannot get those type of opportunities. So I think in order to bridge the gap, I think the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinators are the way to become head coaches. I think it needs to be more offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators that are African Americans. Offensive coordinators get picked to be head coaches before defensive coordinators. I have a few players that I'm going to name, former players that have been coaching, players that have played in the National Football League, that have did work in the National Football League, that knows the X's and the O's from being former players, that can relate to these players what to do physically and mentally in certain situations. And they've been coaching for a long period of time, so they definitely understand it from a coaching standpoint, an assistant standpoint, a coordinator standpoint, and from a head coaching perspective. One is Deuce Staley, Troy Brown, T. Martin, Ike Hilliard, Pep Hamilton, Charlie Strong, Antoine Randall L., Ronald Curry, Brian Johnson. Also a couple of defensive coordinators that I think should be head coaches. Ken Norton Jr., Aaron Glenn, and also a couple of coaches I would like to see get another opportunity for head coaching. Raheem Morris and Leslie Frazier. For me, I've played in the National Football League, and I want to be able to see African-American coaches get what they deserve, the opportunity to become head coaches. And I hope in my lifetime, I can continue to see the plethora of African-American quarterbacks playing the quarterback position in the league. I hope I will get the opportunity to see a plethora of African-American coaches coaching in the National Football League. I hope I will get the opportunity to see a plethora of general managers. And last but not least, I hope I will get a chance to see a few African-American owners in the National Football League. I have broken it down as far as the reasons why I think the African-American coaches have been overlooked. I'm looking forward to this upcoming season, especially for the Washington football team, to see how well they can do. I'm behind Eric Bieniemy, and hopefully Byron Leftwich, who doesn't have a job now, will get the opportunity to be an offensive coordinator. Again, I am Russell Copeland, former NFL player for the Buffalo Bills, Green Bay Packers, and Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you for tuning in. Hit the like button and subscribe.